Let's get one thing straight. I don't decorate for Halloween. I curate an experience. I transform a quarter-acre plot of suburban mediocrity into a crucible of primal fear. My lawn is not a lawn in October. It is a stage, and the play is a psychological thriller designed to make 7-year-olds question the fundamental safety of their universe. And I am the director, the mad auteur of Sycamore Lane. This year's production, which I'd internally codenamed Project Chimera, was my magnum opus. It was October 5th, and I was standing on my driveway, hands on my hips, a cup of rapidly cooling coffee forgotten in my grasp, just soaking it all in. The centerpiece, my pride and joy, was Brenda. Brenda was a custom-built, 8-foot-tall animatronic werewolf, whose fur I'd painstakingly matted with a mixture of hair gel and cold coffee to give it that perfect, mange-ridden look. She was motion-activated, of course. Walk past the third paving stone on the walkway, and her head would snap towards you, her glowing red eyes would narrow, and a deep, guttural snarl, recorded from a nature documentary about pissed-off timber wolves, would echo from a cleverly hidden Bose speaker. But the real masterstroke was the drool. A tiny, hidden pump circulated a non-toxic, glycerin-based solution that dripped from her fangs with a perfect, viscous quality. It took me 3 weekends to get the fluid-to-air ratio just right. She was horrifying. She was beautiful. Brenda wasn't alone, naturally. To her left, clawing their way from the freshly aerated soil, were the boys, my collection of 5 animatronic zombie torsos. Their groans were on a separate, randomized audio loop, so you never got the same pattern of undead misery twice. A professional-grade fog machine, the kind they use for rock concerts, blanketed the entire scene in an ankle-deep miasma, smelling vaguely of ozone and dread. The final touch, the chef's kiss of the whole affair, was the audio overlay. From a second speaker hidden in the maple tree, I played a gentle 30-second loop of children's laughter. Every 4th loop, however, the laughter would subtly pitch down, distorting into a demonic, guttural growl before resetting. It was the kind of detail that didn't just scare you. It unsettled your very soul. It was art. So, when I saw Carol Beckham marching across her perfectly manicured lawn towards mine, clipboard clutched to her chest like a ballistic shield, I knew my peace was about to be disturbed. Carol was the newly elected HOA president, a position she sought with the rabid fervor of a warlord conquering a neighboring province. She viewed any blade of grass over 3 inches tall as a sign of societal decay, and believed that the only acceptable color for a front door was greige. "Leo," she said, stopping just short of my driveway as if she feared stepping on it would stain her sensible New Balance sneakers. Her voice was tight, thin, and permanently disappointed. "Carol," I beamed, giving her my most charming, least threatening smile. "Come to admire my work. Isn't it great? I finally got the fluid-to-air ratio right on Brenda's drool. Non-toxic, of course, mostly." She didn't even glance at Brenda. Her eyes, cold and analytical, scanned the entire scene with the kind of look a health inspector gives a condemned restaurant. "We need to talk about this," she said, waving a dismissive hand at my masterpiece. "This?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You mean my autumnal art installation? A poignant commentary on the fleeting nature of life and the inevitability of decay, represented through the classic zombie motif?" A child, Leo," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a state secret. "The Pattersons' little Timmy. He's 6. He refused to walk on this side of the street to get to the bus stop this morning. His mother said he had a nightmare about a furry demon with bad dental hygiene." She paused for dramatic effect. "Your words, I believe, from last year's community newsletter submission." I had, in fact, used that exact phrase to describe Brenda's predecessor, a less sophisticated werewolf I'd built from a repurposed department store mannequin. "Timmy needs to toughen up," I said. "Life's not all sunshine and juice boxes. Sometimes it's snarling lycanthropes with advanced periodontal disease. It's a teachable moment." Carol was not amused. She lifted her clipboard. "Leo, I have here an official notice of violation from the Sycamore Lane Homeowners Association." She cleared her throat and began to read in a robotic monotone. "Pursuant to Article 4, Section 2B of the Community Bylaws, all holiday displays must remain within the bounds of traditional, family-friendly decor. Your current display has been deemed—" She squinted at the paper. "Kontanam? Psychologically disruptive, aesthetically aggressive, and not in keeping with the community's established autumnal, pumpkin spice and plaid scarves ethos." I blinked. "Aesthetically aggressive? Did you write that yourself, Carol? That's got your passive-aggressive fingerprints all over it." She ignored me, pressing on like a steamroller. "You have 48 hours to remove the offending articles. All of them." She thrust the paper at me. "Failure to comply will result in a $100 daily fine." I took the paper, my masterpiece of terror suddenly feeling like a pile of expensive plastic junk. A daily fine. She was serious. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a declaration of war. A war on Halloween. A war on art. A war on everything I held sacred for 31 days out of the year. "You can't be serious, Carol," I said, my voice losing its jovial edge. "It's Halloween." "It is October 5th, she corrected. "Halloween is one day. Your monstrosities have a shelf life, and it's up." She gave a curt nod, turned on her heel, and marched back to her beige castle, leaving me standing there, a ridiculous piece of paper in my hand, the gentle hum of my fog machine suddenly sounding like a death rattle. The war had begun, and Carol had just made a very, very powerful enemy. I stomped into the house, slamming the door just hard enough to rattle the cheap live, laugh, love sign my mother-in-law had given us. My wife, Maya, was at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, her expression one of practiced neutrality. She was a veteran of my Halloween-related meltdowns. "Let me guess," she said, not missing a beat. "The Grand Inquisitor of the HOA paid you a visit." "She called Brenda aesthetically aggressive," I fumed, throwing the violation notice onto the counter. "She called the boys offending articles. It's sacrilege. It's the suppression of artistic freedom. This is how it starts, Maya. First, they come for the animatronic zombies. Next, they'll be burning books in the town square. Honey, I think you're being a little dramatic. She just wants you to tone it down." Maya, bless her heart, was the anchor that kept my chaotic little ship from sailing right off the edge of the world. She was reason. I was impulse. She was a soothing chamomile tea. I was a quadruple shot espresso that had been struck by lightning. "Tone it down?" I scoffed. "You can't tone down a masterpiece. That's like asking Michelangelo to put some pants on the statue of David." "The David is a statue, Leo. Brenda is a furry nightmare robot that drools." Before I could formulate a retort, my phone buzzed. It was Dave. I hit the speakerphone button, knowing he was the only person who would truly understand my plight. Dave was my best friend, an IT security specialist who viewed all rules and regulations as mere suggestions, a personal challenge to be circumvented. He was the chaos demon that sat on my shoulder, whispering terrible, wonderful ideas into my ear. "Dude, tell me you got the text," his voice crackled through the speaker. "My mole on the inside, Gary from number 42, says Carol went full-on tyrant this morning." "She did, Dave. She served me papers. She called my life's work psychologically disruptive." There was a moment of silence on the line. the kind of respectful pause one gives upon hearing of a great tragedy. Then, Dave's voice returned, low and serious. "Dude, you have to fight this. This is about freedom. This is about the fundamental right to put fake entrails on your lawn." "I know, but she's threatening daily fines. $100 a day." "So? A small price to pay for liberty. This is your Bunker Hill, man." "My color palette was meticulously planned," I lamented, pacing the kitchen. "Corpse gray, blood red, and just a hint of gangrenous green. It's a classic for a reason." "Honey, maybe just tone it down?" Maya repeated gently, ever the peacemaker. "A few smiling ghosts? A friendly vampire? Something approachable." And that's when it happened. The words hit me not as a suggestion, but as a challenge. A beautiful, terrible, magnificently petty challenge. Friendly, approachable, non-threatening. An idea began to form in the deepest, most sarcastic corners of my brain. It was an idea so profoundly stupid, so gloriously compliant on the surface, yet so utterly obnoxious in its soul, that it might just be the most brilliant thing I'd ever conceived. A slow grin spread across my face. Maya saw it, and her own smile faltered. She knew that look. It was my, "I'm about to spend way too much money on a terrible idea" look. "What?" she asked, her voice cautious. Dave, sensing the shift in tone, piped up from the phone. "Uh-oh, I hear gears turning. What are you thinking, Leo?" "Friendly, you say?" I mused, looking out the window at my condemned art installation. "Non-threatening. Oh, I'll give her non-threatening. I'll give her so much non-threatening she'll beg for the zombies back." The next 24 hours were a blur of glorious, vindictive purpose. I took a personal day from work, citing a family aesthetic emergency. I drained my fun money account, the one I usually used for video games and fancy hot sauce. My first stop was Party City. I walked in and went straight to the manager. "Give me every inflatable minion you have in stock," I said with the dead-eyed seriousness of a man defusing a bomb. He thought I was joking until he saw my credit card. I left with 12. Then I hit Walmart, Target, every sad, fluorescent-lit big-box store within a 50-mile radius. I was a man on a mission. By nightfall, my garage looked like a staging ground for a very strange, very yellow invasion. There were minions of all shapes and sizes, from the classic two-eyed Kevin to the one-eyed Stuart. I had a 3-foot minion, a 6-foot minion, even a ridiculous 8-foot minion holding a sign that said, "Let's party." That night, under the cover of darkness, Dave came over. He brought a 6-pack of beer and the unholy glee of a pyromaniac at a fireworks factory. We were a 2-man demolition and construction crew. With solemn reverence, we unplugged Brenda and the boys. We packed them away carefully in the attic, like sleeping gods awaiting their time to rise again. We rolled up the fog machine and disconnected the speakers. Within an hour, my lawn was just a lawn again. It was clean. It was boring. It was beige. Then the true work began. We unboxed the minions, all 87 of them, and one by one, we performed the sacred rite. We took a cheap, white, twin-sized bedsheet, cut 2 goggle-sized eye holes in it, and draped it over a minion. We secured it with a bit of twine around what would be its neck. The effect was immediate and breathtakingly stupid. It was undeniably a ghost, but a ghost with the unmistakable goggle-eyed silhouette of a minion. We did this 87 times. At 3 a.m., drenched in sweat and giggling like idiots, we were ready. We positioned them across the entire lawn, a silent, gormless army of the cheerfully undead. I ran 10 extension cords from 4 different outlets. Then, I stood by the main power strip, took a deep breath, and flipped the switch. 87 tiny air pumps whirred to life in near-perfect unison. The sound wasn't loud, but it was pervasive. A gentle, constant whirr. and as the army of minion ghosts slowly inflated, rising from the ground like a legion of jaundiced specters. I knew I had created my new masterpiece. It was everything Carol had asked for. It was family-friendly. It was non-violent. And it was, without a single doubt, the most aesthetically aggressive thing the world had ever seen. The morning sun cast long shadows across my lawn, each one belonging to a cheerful, sheet-draped, 3 to 6 foot tall ghost. The collective hum of their internal fans was a constant, almost meditative presence. It was the sound of victory. I was on my second cup of coffee when I saw Carol emerge from her house. She was holding a watering can, but she froze mid-step, her body going rigid. She stared. It wasn't the look of fear Brenda had elicited. It wasn't the look of disgust the boys had earned. This was a new expression, a complex cocktail of confusion, disbelief, and pure, unadulterated rage. Her face, usually a placid mask of suburban superiority, was slowly turning a shade of crimson that clashed horribly with her pastel-pink cardigan. She dropped her watering can, spun on her heel, and marched back inside. Oh yes, she was apoplectic. It was tacky. It was obnoxious. And best of all, there wasn't a drop of fake blood in sight. I had followed her rules to the letter, and in doing so, I had created something 1,000 times more infuriating to her than any zombie. It took her less than an hour. I knew the call had been made when a police cruiser, moving at a speed that suggested a distinct lack of urgency, rolled down our street and parked in front of my house. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a weary salt-and-pepper mustache, and the profound air of a man who had seen every form of human stupidity, and was no longer surprised by any of it. This was Officer Miller. His partner was younger, bright-eyed, and looked like he was trying to grow a mustache of his own with very limited success. He had a glimmer in his eye that told me he was fighting a losing battle against a smile. This was Officer Davis. I met them at the door, projecting an aura of calm, law-abiding citizenship. "Morning, officers," I said brightly. "Beautiful day for it, isn't it?" Officer Miller gave my lawn a long, slow, deadpan look. His eyes lingered on the 8-foot ghost minion wearing the "Let's Party" sign, the sheet draped awkwardly over its raised arms. He took a deep breath, the kind you take before you have to talk to a toddler about why they can't wear a saucepan as a hat. "Sir, my name is Officer Miller. This is Officer Davis. We've had a complaint from a Miss Carol Beckham regarding a visual and auditory disturbance." "A disturbance?" I asked, my face a mask of pure innocence. "Here, heavens no, it's been quiet as a mouse. Well, except for the ghosts, of course." Officer Davis coughed, a sound that was suspiciously close to a snort. Miller shot him a look that could curdle milk. "The ghosts, sir?" Miller asked, his voice flatter than a Kansas landscape. "Yes, officers. Is there a problem? As you can see," I gestured grandly towards the whirring legion, "following the HOA's very helpful feedback, I've removed all the frightening elements from my Halloween display. These are just ghosts, friendly ones, part of the minions for a spooktacular Halloween charity, you know, to raise awareness for, spooky kids in need. Fictional charity, of course, for legal reasons." Officer Miller just stared at me. I could see the cogs turning in his head as he tried to find the section of the penal code that applied to weaponized tackiness. "She mentioned the noise, sir," Officer Davis piped up, recovering his composure. "The noise?" I cupped a hand to my ear theatrically. "You mean the hum? That's just their ghostly essence. The ethereal vibrations of the ectoplasm, very gentle. I measured it, actually." I pulled out my phone and showed him a decibel meter app. "See? 45 decibels. That's quieter than a public library, which, ironically, is a place Carol should visit more often. They have copies of the HOA bylaws there. I checked. The noise ordinance doesn't kick in until 70 decibels, I had him. I had him on a technicality, the most glorious kind of victory. Officer Miller's mustache twitched. He knew I was being a smartass. I knew he knew. He knew I knew he knew. It was a beautiful, silent ballet of mutual understanding. "Sir," Miller said, his voice strained, "your neighbor is also claiming visual blight." "Visual blight? Is that even a real crime?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Because if it is, you should have a look at the Hendersons' collection of lawn gnomes. One of them is fishing in a bucket. It's an affront to good taste." I leaned in conspiratorially. "Besides, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? One man's visual blight is another man's pop art installation, commenting on the commercialization of modern folklore." Officer Davis finally lost his battle. A full-on grin broke out across his face before he quickly tried to disguise it as another cough. Miller just looked tired. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Right now. He wanted to be writing parking tickets. He wanted to be breaking up a bar fight. He wanted to be investigating a stolen flamingo. Anything but this. "There's no ordinance against this," Miller conceded, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "As long as the noise stays below the limit and they don't block the public sidewalk. You're not breaking any laws." "Excellent. I'm a firm believer in the law," I said with a nod. "Just try to be a good neighbor, sir," Miller said, the plea of a man at the end of his rope. "I'm the best neighbor," I declared. "I'm providing free, family-friendly entertainment for the whole community." Miller sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 25 years on the force. He tipped his cap and turned to go. As they walked back to their cruiser, I saw Officer Davis discreetly pull out his phone and snap a quick picture of the minion army. He gave me a subtle thumbs up before ducking into the car. I closed the door, my heart pounding with adrenaline and pure, unadulterated glee. I had won. I had faced the law, and the law had shrugged and walked away. But as I listened to the gentle, pervasive whirr of the 87 fans, I realized Miller's words had given me an idea. The complaint was about the noise. Carol hated the noise. A wicked, beautiful, and profoundly expensive idea began to bloom in my mind. She thought this was a disturbance? She hadn't seen anything yet. The police visit hadn't scared me. It had emboldened me. Carol's complaint wasn't just about the minions themselves. It was about the sound. The constant, low hum of the fans was a form of psychological torture for a woman who probably considered the chirping of birds to be a public nuisance. This was a new and fascinating vulnerability to exploit. My current setup was amateur hour. It was time to go pro. It was time to bring in a contractor. I found Sal's Construction No Job Too Weird in a local business listing. The tagline alone told me he was my guy. I called, and a gruff, gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "Sal." "Hi, Sal. My name is Leo. I have a unique residential construction project. Your ad says no job too weird." There was a skeptical grunt on the other end. "Yeah? What you got?" "It's an outdoor multi-level platform for a seasonal display, with complex electrical requirements." "Seasonal display? Like for Christmas lights?" "Sort of," I said. "It would be better if you saw it in person." An hour later, a dusty, beat-up Ford F-150 pulled up to my curb. Sal emerged. He was a man in his late 50s, built like a fire hydrant, with a weathered face, hands like catcher's mitts, and a toothpick perched permanently in the corner of his mouth. He walked up to my lawn, stopped, and just stared at the army of minion ghosts. He didn't say a word. He just looked at them, then at my house, then back at the minions. His expression was completely unreadable. "All right," he finally grunted. shifting the toothpick to the other side of his mouth. "You're the guy." "I'm the guy," I confirmed. "So what's this I'm building?" I took a deep breath. This was the pitch. "So, Sal, what I'm picturing is a multi-tiered reinforced platform, like a wedding cake, but for these guys." I gestured to a particularly gormless-looking minion ghost. 3 levels, circular, maybe 12 feet in diameter at the base. I want them displayed properly, you know? Give them some height, some gravitas. Sal continued to stare, his gaze unblinking. I pressed on, my enthusiasm growing. "And I need it wired. I mean professionally wired. Each one needs its own dedicated weatherproof outlet. I want them all synced to a central controller, a single switch that brings the whole glorious army to life at once." He slowly looked from the minions to me, then back to the minions. He chewed on his toothpick for a solid 30 seconds, the only sound the gentle hum of the 87 fans. "You want me to build a shrine," he stated, not as a question, but as a simple declaration of fact. "For the yellow tic-tacs." "They're ghosts now," I corrected him gently. "It's respectful, but that's not all." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I want to install a sound system, a professional one. Not loud, that's the key. I want 4 outdoor speakers, buried and hidden, and I want them to play one sound, on a loop, at a very low frequency, almost subliminal." Sal's eyebrows, which I had previously assumed were immovable fixtures, raised a fraction of an inch. "Let me guess. Spooky chains? Howling wolves?" I smiled. "The word banana." Sal stopped chewing. He took the toothpick out of his mouth and looked at it, as if it might hold the answers to the universe. Then he looked back at me. He stared for a full 10 seconds. I could see him weighing the options. Turn and walk away from the crazy man, or take the crazy man's money. Money, thankfully, won. He shrugged, a massive, world-weary movement of his shoulders. "Gonna cost you," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Need a permit for a structure that size, and the wiring's gonna be a pain, but my money's as green as yours." He stuck the toothpick back in his mouth. "You want a shrine to yellow tic-tacs in ghost costumes? I'll build you a shrine to yellow tic-tacs in ghost costumes. When do you want to start?" The next week was a glorious spectacle of suburban absurdity. Sal and his 2-man crew, a pair of bewildered young guys named Marco and Tony, descended on my lawn. They were professionals. They laid down plywood to protect the grass. They used laser levels and chalk lines. They dug foundations and poured concrete footings, all for a temporary minion display. The neighbors were fascinated. The gentle hum of the fans was replaced by the much more authoritative sounds of circular saws, nail guns, and the gruff yelling of Sal directing his crew. Carol watched from her window, her face a thundercloud of impotent rage. She would occasionally come out to take pictures, no doubt documenting every perceived infraction for her growing file. Gary from number 42, my de facto neighborhood ally, came over one afternoon with a couple of cold beers. "Leo, my man," he said, handing one to me as we watched Sal's crew install the last of the weatherproof electrical boxes. "You are my hero. My wife thinks you're insane, but I think you're a genius." "It's a fine line, Gary," I said, taking a sip. The best part was my interactions with Sal. He never asked why. Not once. He just did the job. But every conversation was a masterclass in deadpan comedy. "Hey, Sal," I'd call out. "Can we make sure the top tier has enough structural integrity for the 8-footer? He's the centerpiece." Sal would look up from his blueprints, sigh, and yell to his crew. "Hey, Marco, the big fella goes on top. Double up the reinforcement on the summit." The day they installed the sound system was my favorite. The audio technician Sal hired, a skinny kid with a ponytail, was trying to understand the requirements. "So, just the one word?" the kid asked, looking at his laptop. "No music, no effects?" "Just the word," I confirmed. "And you want it at minus 30 decibels?" he asked, confused. "You'll barely be able to hear it." "Exactly," I said. "I don't want people to hear it. I want them to feel it, in their fillings." Sal just stood there, arms crossed, shaking his head slowly. He'd seen it all, but it was clear he hadn't seen anything quite like this. As they finished up on the final day, Sal handed me the invoice. It was substantial. "Pleasure doing business with you, kid," he grunted. "You too, Sal. The quality of your work is impeccable." He nodded, looking at the finished three-tiered platform, a marvel of modern carpentry and electrical engineering. "Just do me a favor," he said, turning to leave. "Whatever you're planning for Christmas, call someone else." That night, I put the minions on their new thrones. I plugged each one into its dedicated outlet. Then, with Maya and Dave watching from the porch, I flipped the single, satisfyingly chunky switch Sal had installed. The Legion inflated, rising majestically on their tiered shrine. Then I turned on the audio. A deep, almost imperceptible thrum filled the air. You couldn't quite make out the word from the street, but you could feel it, a low, constant vibration that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. Banana, 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 it was magnificent, it was art, and it was going to drive Carol Beckham completely and utterly insane. The completion of the Minion Shrine, as I'd officially named it, was the shot heard around the cul-de-sac. It was no longer just a quirky lawn display, it was a statement, a monument. And just like that, the unspoken tensions on Sycamore Lane erupted into a full-blown, passive-aggressive civil war. The lines were drawn in fertilizer and thinly veiled insults over hedges. Team Leo was, by far, the more fun faction. Our base was the under-12 demographic. The kids went nuts. The multi-level structure turned my lawn from a display into an attraction. They treated it like a landmark, dragging their parents over after school to pay homage to the Minion Castle. My front porch became a repository for tribute. I'd come out in the morning to find crayon drawings of minion ghosts taped to my door, often with captions like, "You are the best," and "Mr. Leo is puny." One kid even left a single, slightly bruised banana on my welcome mat. I almost wept with joy. My adult support was smaller, but more strategic. Gary from number 42 became my unofficial minister of propaganda. He started a private Facebook group called the Sycamore Lane Society for Aesthetic Freedom and Minions. It had 12 members. He'd post daily photo updates of the shrine and offer moral support. One evening, he snuck over with a six-pack and a proposal. "We should project googly eyes onto Carol's garage," he whispered excitedly. I had to talk him down. Escalation had to be strategic, but I appreciated his spirit. Team Carol, on the other hand, was a cabal of grim-faced traditionalists. They communicated in knowing, disapproving glances at the mailbox and hushed tones during their power walks. Their leader, of course, was Generalissima Beckham herself. Her primary weapon was the HOA rulebook, which she now carried with her everywhere. Her secondary weapons were pettiness and a complete lack of self-awareness. The war of attrition began. My sprinklers, which were programmed to water my lawn at 6 a.m., would mysteriously be facing the street, dousing the morning paper of the Crabtree family, who were staunch Carol loyalists. In retaliation, an anonymous complaint was filed with the city about the precise height of my hedges. I spent a Saturday with a tape measure and a pair of shears, muttering obscenities under my breath. The conflict reached its zenith in the neutral territory of the local grocery store. I was in the produce section, trying to decide if I was a fancy enough person to buy heirloom tomatoes, when I overheard two women talking by the avocados. "Did you see it?" one of them whispered. "The house on Sycamore with all the things." "The Minion house?" the other replied. "Oh my God, Brenda, you have to see it at night. It glows. I drove the kids by last night. It's the most ridiculous, wonderful thing I've ever seen." I was the Minion house. I had a title. I was a local legend. I puffed out my chest, grabbed the most expensive tomatoes I could find, and swaggered towards the checkout. My newfound fame, however, came at a price. A few days later, a young woman with a notepad and an overly enthusiastic smile knocked on my door. She was from a local blog called Suburban Secrets. The piece, she explained, was for a series on neighborhood disputes. She wanted my side of the story. "So, Leo," she said, sitting on my porch swing while I stood, leaning against the doorframe trying to look cool and defiant. "What's the message behind this installation?" I took a long, thoughtful pause. "It's a commentary," I began, pulling the most pretentious nonsense I could summon from the depths of my soul. "It's about the duality of identity. On the surface you see a ghost, a classic symbol of fear and the unknown. But beneath that spectral veneer, there is a minion, a symbol of childlike joy, servitude, and an insatiable desire for bananas. It asks the question, are we the ghost we present to the world, or the minion we are inside?" She scribbled furiously in her notepad, her eyes wide with what I could only assume was profound admiration for my artistic depth. The article came out the next day with the headline, "Suburban Spite or Postmodern Art? How One Man's Halloween Display Became a Battle for the Soul of Sycamore Lane." It featured a dramatic, low-angle shot of the Minion Shrine and quoted me extensively. Carol, naturally, was quoted as well. "It is a blight on our community and a flagrant disregard for our bylaws," her quote read. "It lowers property values, and the incessant, low-frequency sound is giving my Shih Tzu anxiety." The article was the final straw. Carol couldn't win the war on the battlefield of my lawn. She couldn't win it in the court of public opinion. So she decided to take it to the one place she felt she had the home field advantage: the hastily called emergency HOA meeting. The fate of the Minion Shrine would be decided under the flickering fluorescent lights of the community clubhouse. The Sycamore Lane Community Clubhouse normally smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. Tonight, it smelled of those things, plus the palpable tension of a Cold War-era spy exchange. The room was packed. Every folding chair was taken. People were standing against the walls. It looked less like an HOA meeting and more like a casting call for a reality show about angry people in sensible shoes. Dave was there for moral support, sitting next to me and providing a running commentary under his breath. "Look at Carol's power suit," he whispered as she stood at the front podium. "It's the color of a sad beige cloud. She's trying to intimidate us with blandness." Maya was there too, sitting on my other side. She squeezed my hand. "Just be calm, be reasonable, and don't call her the Grand Inquisitor to her face," she advised. The meeting was called to order by Ron, the HOA treasurer, a man so mild-mannered he seemed perpetually on the verge of apologizing for his own existence. He nervously cleared his throat and handed the floor over to Carol. Carol strode to the podium with the grim determination of a prosecutor in a high-stakes trial. She tapped the microphone, which produced a screech of feedback that made everyone wince. This, apparently, was her opening salvo. She then launched into a meticulously prepared PowerPoint presentation. "Esteemed homeowners," she began, clicking to the first slide, which showed a grainy, zoomed-in photo of my house taken from her bedroom window. "We are gathered here tonight to address a crisis of aesthetics, of auditory peace, and of the very character of our community." For the next 15 minutes, Carol laid out her case. She had charts. She had graphs. She showed a decibel meter reading from her lawn, highlighting the incessant hum. She showed a slide with anonymous, cherry-picked quotes from neighbors. I find it distracting, and it's not very traditional. And my personal favorite, the constant yellow is unautumnal. She saved her big finish for the legal argument. Furthermore, she declared, her voice rising with righteous indignation, I draw your attention to Bylaw C-17, subsection 4, which clearly states that all holiday displays must exhibit thematic and aesthetic uniformity with the neighborhood's prevailing standards. She looked around the room, making eye contact with her allies. This minion-pocalypse is the very definition of non-uniformity. She finished her presentation with a photo of a single, tasteful pumpkin on her own porch. The slide simply said, community, tastefulness, order. The room was silent. She had made her case. It was my turn. I walked to the podium, my heart thumping a little. I had a few notes scribbled on an index card, but I mostly planned to wing it. Dave gave me a thumbs up. Maya gave me a look that said, I love you, please don't ruin this. Good evening, everyone, I started, my voice calm and friendly. First, I'd like to thank Carol for her passionate presentation. It's clear she cares deeply about our community, as do I. I looked out at the faces in the crowd. I'll admit, my initial Halloween display this year was perhaps a little intense. The HOA, through Carol, informed me that it was too scary and aesthetically aggressive. And I listened. I took it all down. I wanted to comply. I wanted to be a good neighbor. I paused, letting that sink in. So I asked myself, what's the opposite of scary? What's the friendliest, most family-oriented thing I can think of? And the answer was clear. Minions. Dressed as traditional, non-threatening ghosts. I was simply responding to the HOA's feedback. A few people in the audience chuckled. Carol's eye started to twitch. Now, regarding the noise, I continued, I have also measured the decibel level. It's 45 dB. For comparison, a quiet conversation is 50 dB. A bird call is 44 dB. Are we going to start fining the wrens for being too chatty? More chuckles. And as for the low-frequency sound, I'd like to apologize. I was unaware that it was causing distress to Carol's Shih Tzu. I've turned it off. Effective immediately. A small lie, but a strategic concession. Finally, the issue of uniformity, I said, looking directly at Carol. With all due respect, Carol, the bylaw you cited, C-17, refers specifically to the placement and color palette of Christmas lighting displays. I know because I read it. It says absolutely nothing about spectral, goggle-eyed beings of indeterminate origin for Halloween. To apply that bylaw here would be a gross misinterpretation of the text. I leaned on the podium. Look, this is Halloween. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be a little weird. The kids in this neighborhood love the display. I see them every single day dragging their parents over to look at it. Isn't that what community is about? Sharing a little joy? Even if that joy is shaped like a weird, ghostly banana person. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Gary from number 42 stood up. I, for one, think it's great, he boomed. It's the most interesting thing that's happened on this street in 10 years. Suddenly, the room erupted. It's tacky, and it brings down property values, shouted Mrs. Crabtree. Lighten up, Margaret! It's for the kids! Another neighbor retorted. The meeting quickly devolved into a shouting match, with Team Leo and Team Carol airing all their pent-up suburban grievances. Ron, the treasurer, was banging his gavel feebly, pleading for order. Carol stood frozen, her perfect presentation undone by a simple appeal to fun. Finally, after 10 minutes of chaos, the HOA board voted. The motion was to formally classify my display as a violation. The vote was 2 for, 2 against, with 1 abstention from a board member who claimed a conflict of interest because his grandson was obsessed with the Minions. The motion failed. They were deadlocked. They voted to table the issue until the post-holiday debriefing in January. I had won. I walked back to my seat, a triumphant grin on my face. Dave slapped me on the back. Maya kissed my cheek. Carol stood at the podium, utterly defeated, her beige power suit looking more faded than ever. The Minion Shrine was safe, at least until Halloween, and I knew exactly how I was going to celebrate. The victory at the HOA meeting was sweet. I felt like a revolutionary leader who had just successfully defended his tiny, weird nation from the forces of a bland and oppressive empire. But as the days ticked closer to Halloween, I knew that just surviving wasn't enough. The Minion Shrine was magnificent, a towering testament to my pettiness. But it needed a crescendo. It needed a grand finale. It needed one last perfect flourish that would elevate it from a neighborhood dispute into the stuff of local legend. My inspiration came from the source of all my problems and solutions. Carol. Her main complaint had been visual and auditory. I had addressed the auditory, or at least I'd pretended to, but the visual component was still a ripe field for innovation. The minions were static. They just stood there, gently swaying, whirring. What if they could do more? I knew what I had to do. I pulled out my phone and dialed a familiar number. A gruff voice answered. Sal. Sal, it's Leo, the minion guy. A deep, world-weary sigh traveled through the phone line. What fresh hell you got for me now, kid? A simple job this time, I promise. No more wiring, no more concrete, I said brightly. How fast can you build me a movie screen? Like a big one. Maybe 12 feet tall, 20 feet wide. Needs to be sturdy. And I need it installed right behind the top tier of the wedding cake. There was a long pause. I could practically hear him chewing his toothpick, contemplating the life choices that had led him to this moment. A movie screen, he repeated, his voice flat. You're gonna show movies to the tic-tacs. Something like that, I said evasively. It's for the kids. The grand finale on Halloween night. Another sigh. Fine. I'll have Marco and Tony over tomorrow. It'll be done by the weekend. But Leo, he said, his voice dropping to a serious tone. After this, lose my number. I'm serious. My wife is starting to ask questions. With the final piece of hardware secured, it was time for the software. I convened an emergency meeting in my home office with my two most trusted advisors, Maya and Dave. By now, Maya had fully crossed over from exasperated but loving spouse to enthusiastic co-conspirator. The HOA meeting had awakened a dormant, rebellious streak in her. She was all in. Okay, team, I said, pacing in front of my monitor. We have a 20-foot screen, a commercial-grade 4K projector I may have slightly overpaid for on Amazon, and 3 nights until Halloween. We need content. What are we thinking? Dave asked, leaning back in my office chair, already spinning with ideas. We could project a giant blinking eye of Sauron over the minions. That'd send Carol into a tailspin. Too aggressive, Maya countered. The whole point of the minions is that they're inoffensively cheerful. We have to stick to the theme. The weapon is joy, not terror. She was right. The sheer weaponized joy was my greatest asset. My malicious compliance had to be complete. The finale couldn't be scary or mean-spirited. It had to be so ridiculously, overwhelmingly happy that any complaint against it would make Carol look like a monster. And so, we got to work. For the next 2 nights, my office became a top-secret production studio. We downloaded every high-definition minion clip we could find. We used video editing software to digitally superimpose little white sheets onto the animated minions, making them look just like their inflatable brethren on my lawn. Dave, a closet EDM enthusiast, went to work on the audio, finding a high-energy, thumping remix of the Ghostbusters theme song that was so catchy it was practically a bioweapon. My job was the choreography. Using some surprisingly complex animation software, I spent hours painstakingly syncing the movements of the digital ghost minions to the beat of the music. I made them do the floss, I made them do the robot, I created a kick line. It was the most absurd, pointless, and creatively fulfilling project I had ever undertaken. By the evening of October 30th, it was done. We gathered in the office, turned off the lights, and watched the final cut. On my 27-inch monitor, an army of tiny, animated ghost minions danced with joyous, reckless abandon to a pulsating beat. It was dumb. It was pointless. It was spectacular. Maya was wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. Dave was just staring at the screen, a look of profound awe on his face. "Leo," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." We had our grand finale. The stage was set. The secret weapon was armed. All we had to do now was wait for Halloween night. Halloween night descended on Sycamore Lane not as a quiet, spooky evening, but as a full-blown event. It was like our street was the main stage at a festival, and my house was the headliner. Cars were parked for 3 blocks in every direction. People I'd never seen before were wandering down our sidewalk, phones held aloft, a sense of pilgrimage in their eyes. They had come to see the Minion House. The atmosphere was electric. The Minion Shrine was in its full glory. All 87 ghost minions were inflated and glowing, their goggle eyes staring out from their multi-level perch. The air hummed with the gentle whir of their fans. From the hidden speakers, the subliminal, low-frequency chant of "banana, banana, banana" pulsed, a secret heartbeat for the whole scene. It was a perfect, crisp autumn night, and the absurdity of it all felt magical. Maya and I were on the front porch armed with 2 giant bowls of the good stuff, full-sized candy bars. We weren't messing around. The trick-or-treaters were ecstatic. Little kids dressed as astronauts, witches, and an alarming number of video game characters would run up to our lawn, stop, and just gaze in wonder. "It's the Minion Castle," a tiny Captain America shouted. "Can I get a picture?" a girl dressed as Elsa asked, already posing with a medium-sized minion ghost in the foreground. Parents were laughing, taking photos, and shaking their heads in amused disbelief. It was pure, chaotic joy. At 7:55 p.m., I gave Maya a nod. I slipped inside, my heart thumping with anticipation. This was it. The culmination of a month of spite, creativity, and questionable financial decisions. I sat down at my desk, pulled up the projector software, and took a deep breath. My finger hovered over the play button. Outside, the crowd was thick. I could hear their chatter and laughter through the window. Dave was out there, playing hype man, telling people to stick around for the main event at 8 p.m. The clock on my computer ticked over. 8 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. I clicked the mouse. Outside, the massive projector I'd hidden in an upstairs window whirred to life. A bright, powerful beam of light shot across the yard, hitting the 20-foot screen Sal's crew had built. For a second, the screen was just a bright white rectangle. Then, the image resolved. And the music hit. A massive, thumping bass line erupted from the 4 main speakers, which I had cranked to a robust, but still legally compliant volume. The EDM remix of the Ghostbusters theme song blasted through the night. And on the screen, projected 20 feet wide behind the real minions, my creation came to life. An army of giant, animated ghost minions filled the screen, and they began to dance. The effect was one of overwhelming, joyous sensory overload. You had the three-dimensional army of real minions on their shrine, and behind them, a two-dimensional army of their cartoon brethren performing a perfectly synchronized, high-energy, utterly ridiculous dance routine. They spun, they jumped, they did the worm. The kick line was glorious. The crowd went insane. A wave of laughter, cheers, and applause swept down the street. People's phones, which had been pointing at the minions, now tilted up to capture the big screen. Toddlers started dancing on the sidewalk. Teenagers who were too cool for everything were laughing, their cynical facades cracking. Even the adults were grooving along to the beat. I watched the whole scene unfold from my window, feeling a surge of pure, triumphant glee. I had done it. I had created the most joyfully obnoxious Halloween display in human history. Then I saw her. Carol. Her front door opened, and she stepped out onto her porch, clipboard in hand, ready to document this new, horrendous breach of the peace. But she stopped dead. She took in the scene. The glowing shrine. The giant dancing cartoons. The hundreds of people, her neighbors, strangers, all united in a moment of shared, idiotic happiness. She saw the kids dancing. She heard the genuine, unadulterated laughter. Her face, which I expected to be contorted with rage, was just blank. She lowered the clipboard. She looked at the dancing minions, then at the happy crowd, then back at the minions. She couldn't fight this. There was no bylaw against infectious joy. There was no ordinance prohibiting spontaneous dance parties. She had tried to regulate fun, and fun had responded by throwing a rave on her doorstep. Without a word, she turned around, went back inside, and shut the door. The war was over. A few minutes later, I saw the familiar headlights of a police cruiser. Miller and Davis. They parked down the street, not even bothering to get out right away. They just watched. After a few minutes, Miller got out, but only to help direct the flow of traffic that was now clogging the street. He shook his head, a small, reluctant smile playing on his lips. Davis, however, had his phone out again. He was leaning against the hood of the car, recording the whole spectacle, a massive grin plastered across his face. He caught my eye from across the street and gave me a slow, respectful nod. Victory was absolute. The morning of November 1st arrived with the quiet, slightly hung-over feeling that follows a great party. The air was still, the street was empty, and my lawn was a scene of serene carnage. The grand screen stood like a silent monolith, but the 87 minion ghosts lay deflated on their tiered shrine, looking like sad yellow and white puddles. The minion-pocalypse was over. I was outside with a leaf blower, starting the long, tedious process of cleanup, when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Carol. She was walking across her lawn, heading directly for me. She wasn't holding a clipboard. This was uncharted territory. I instinctively braced for impact, my hand tightening on the leaf blower's handle. She stopped at the edge of my driveway. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, the only sound the rustling of a few leaves blowing across the asphalt. "Leo," she said finally. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual sharp, accusatory edge. "Carol," I replied, equally flat. "Come to inspect the deflation process? It's all up to code. I can assure you they've been humanely put down." She ignored my attempt at humor. She looked past me, at the deflated remains of the minion army. "The Patterson boy," she said, her gaze distant. "Timmy. He dressed as a ghost minion last night. He made his mother cut eye holes in a pillowcase." I waited, unsure where this was going. "His mother told me he called your house the Happy Ghost Castle," she continued, still not looking at me. "Oh," was all I could manage. The Happy Ghost Castle. A 6-year-old had understood my masterpiece better than any adult. Carol finally met my eyes. There was no anger there, just a profound, bottomless sense of exhaustion. It was the look of a general who had lost a war she never should have started. "Next year," she said, the words coming out slowly, as if they pained her. "Just send me the plans ahead of time. A memo would be sufficient." And with that, she turned and walked back to her house. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a concession of friendship, but it was a truce. It was the white flag, delivered in the most Carol way imaginable. Later that day, Maya and Dave came out to help me pack everything away. We dismantled the shrine, Sal's magnificent creation, piece by piece. We folded the sheets and rolled up the deflated minions, packing them into boxes like hibernating soldiers. We laughed the whole time, recounting the highlights of the past month, the police visits, Sal's deadpan reactions, the chaos of the HOA meeting. As we stored the last box in the attic, I looked at my lawn. It was just a lawn again, but it felt different. I hadn't just won a petty fight with my neighbor. I had accidentally, through sheer spite and creative escalation, created something. A story. A legend. I was no longer just Leo, the graphic designer from number 38. I was the minion guy. I was the curator of the happy ghost castle. And strangely, I was okay with that. I had created a new, weird, wonderful neighborhood tradition. That evening, exhausted and happy, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through the mail. Tucked between a credit card offer and a water bill was an early Christmas catalog. On the cover, a massive, inflatable Santa Claus was waving cheerfully. An evil, beautiful, magnificently petty glint sparked in my eye. I could already picture it. 100 inflatable Santas, all wired to a sound system playing. What? A subliminal loop of someone whispering, "Ho, ho, ho?" Before the idea could even fully form, Maya, walking by with a glass of wine, glanced at the catalog, then at my face. She saw the look. The same look I'd had the day she'd suggested a friendly ghost. "Oh no," she said, pointing a stern finger at me. "Don't even think about it. I mean it, Leo. Don't you dare." I just smiled. Christmas was only 54 days away.